Welcome to the Archetypal Mosaic. This is Mikhail Tank. Today I'm sitting in the offices of Alternative Tentacles, a record label that's been in the East Bay since 1979. I'm sitting with the general manager, Jesse Townley. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me. Let's discuss the logo and the history behind Alternative Tentacles.
Sure. Well, one thing, Alternative Tentacles started in San Francisco. I should have mentioned that. But we've been over here in the East Bay since 2002 because we were able to get more room for less rent. But Jello Biafra, who owns and operates Alternative Tentacles, has lived in San Francisco since before the label began. And so AT was started in 1979 to release the first single from the band Dead Kennedys, California Uber Alles. Is a 7-inch. It basically quickly, from 79 on, kind of changed itself to become an outlet for all kinds of insane, up-and-coming, underground, unheard bands. Everything from punk bands like DOA and Dead Kennedys to weirder bands like Christian Lunch, Butthole Surfers, through the present day. Like, we have bands like Itch.io, who are insane in their own separate way from earlier insane bands like Alice Donut or No Means No, or there's so many of them. But yeah, we started back then. I was not a part of that. I was on the East Coast being a kid. But Jello Biafra has been the mainstay throughout the entire history of Alternative Tentacles. And our friend Winston Smith, graphic designer, collage artist, came up with the logo to the bat logo, which is basically kind of like I would say like the equivalent of the CBGB's logo, except it's underground and DIY, and it's like the CBGB's in terms of it has its own cachet. When you see the bat logo with it's a bat, a stylized bat with that has a broken missile in one claw and a broken cross with a dollar sign on it in the other claw. It means something, and it has, it means a lot to people. And so, personally, growing up as a kid, as a young punk rocker, if you had told me that 40-something-year-old Jesse would be running Alternative Tentacles and Jello Biafra was my boss, I would have been like, "You're kidding me, really? That's crazy." And it is crazy, but it's a lot of fun as well.
Now, you have a record coming out. I mean, the record label has a record coming out this August. Can you talk about that?
Sure. It's by a band called Arno Corps, who are heroes from Austria. And what they do is they are trying to reclaim the ancient Austrian myths that have been bastardized by Hollywood, such Austroploitation films such as Terminator, Predator, Pumping Iron 1, etc., and really reclaiming those myths and telling them in the true Austrian way that they were intended to be. And they have a new record out called The Unbelievable, which covers other Austrian myths that have before now have not been reclaimed, like Twins and Mr. Freeze, and others like that. So they're very unique, and they are a live band unlike any other. We're actually reissuing 2 of their earlier EPs, The Ballsy and The Fantastic, and then the new one is called The Unbelievable. I'm not sure if you can see there's a continuum in what they do. And the first thing we did with them was a few years back. We released a gatefold LP by them called The Greatest Band of All Time. So they're really humble, really subtle.
Sounds very humble indeed.
Yes.
Sounds fun. Now, tell me about your distribution model. You distribute both digitally, and are you going to bring cassettes back in?
No, I hope not. Sorry, that's a personal thing. I'm not a fan of cassettes. Though the first records I ever bought were on cassette, so I recognize their technological place in history.
What was the first record you ever bought before we continue?
AC/DC, Back in Black.
Okay, great.
So.
Do you still listen to that album?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Of course. No, so we do physical and digital, and we do have a lot of cassettes. We stopped making cassettes in the mid-90s. Mid to late 90s is when we stopped making them. We still have a lot left over. So if anybody wants to go to our website at alternativetentacles.com, they can order some.
Lana Del Rey's new album includes a cassette, interestingly enough.
A lot of people, even in the underground, are doing cassettes again, and good. Maybe at some point AT will put out a new cassette. I don't really know, but we've been doing really well with vinyl. Like we never have left vinyl alone. Like we've always put out vinyl.
That's cool.
For many years, though, we did find it depended on the band. Certain bands were CD and digital bands, but their crowds did not like vinyl. So for some bands, we would put out your standard album, but we just do it on CD and digitally. Other bands, the opposite, where their crowds love vinyl, not so hot on CD. If they really want it on their phone or digitally, they can just download it through iTunes or eMusic or whatever.
So pretty much vinyl, CD, and digital, right? Anything else?
No.
Do you think 8-track is ever going to come back?
No.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. Because the 8-track players, you can only find them in thrift stores, and it's up in the air whether or not they work. Like nobody's making new ones, so that's why they can't come back.
Now, does the tentacle concept come at all from an octopus looking for new food or new perspectives through music?
I don't know what the original one is. I can give you my interpretation. I kind of see it as alternative tentacles instead of the tentacles of there's old socialist and leftist propaganda images of bank cartels with tentacles, enveloping the world, like capitalism enveloping the world with their tentacles, things like that, or railroad combines. That's going back to 1890s, but that kind of oldie timey kind of imagery. So my interpretation, and this is not the original one because I was not around in 1979 when Winston and Jello came up with this, is that it's alternative tentacles in terms of alternative ways of existing, alternative types of art and bands and just lifestyles, trying to envelop the world and spread it throughout the world, so yeah, instead of the tentacles of the bad guys, the man, capitalism, whatever you want to call it, it's the tentacles of weirdos and freaks, and it's fucking awesome.
Fantastic. Now, the reason why people liked vinyl in the first place, supposedly, is because it was AAA, right? It wasn't digitally recorded or digitally mastered, so they heard the warmth and they related to it. It kind of came out of the vinyl player into their soul. I mean, as corny as that may sound. But nowadays, a lot of the vinyl is actually DDD or whatever, right? And so that warmth that vinyl is supposed to bring is absent in a way. How do you think that works? And do you think there's a way to bring back the A sound? Analog, meaning?
Analog, yes, let's say. And then D as in digital.
Yes.
So a lot of people do almost all analog in terms of their production and manufacturing. People record on reel-to-reel. Maybe they mix it on reel-to-reel, or maybe they mix it on a Pro Tools computer. It really depends. I don't have that ear. Jello Biafra has that ear. He and a lot of people who we work with can tell how a record was mastered. There's direct-to-metal mastering directly from digital files, DMM. A lot of record pressing plants use that nowadays. Not all. Most of the people we deal with lacquers, which is that's a way where talk about analog. It's very physical, actually, where a mastering engineer takes the finished mastered music, whether it's on from a reel-to-reel or digital file, and then plays, screws with the EQs a bit, does whatever he or she does in the studio, and then has a special lathe cut the music into a lacquer, which is shaped like a record, but I think it's
acetate.
It's similar to an acetate, but it's more permanent. An acetate is good for kind of hearing what your mastering engineer is doing before they finish. The finished version is basically the lacquer. The acetate is kind of like kind of a one-off, like you just kind of to check out the sound and make sure the sound quality is kind of where you want it to go. But the lacquer, so they cut with using a special lathe on a special machine, cut the grooves that are the record, and then that lacquer gets sent off physically to, and it's a big old disc, it's a little over 12 inches in diameter, because you need a little bit of room, I guess, I don't know. And then they send it over to the pressing plant, and the pressing plant makes stampers out of it, mothers and master plates, and those stampers are what actually, and then they make stampers from the mother, or is it the master? I don't know. Anyway, it goes back and forth. It's kind of like, it's basically making molds from the lacquer to make the stampers, which are in reverse. Then that stamper hits the raw vinyl and makes the final record. And throughout all that process, the physicality of it is all the little specks of information, physical specks of information in the grooves stay the same from the lacquer to the final product. So that's why you have a test pressing to make sure that final product reflects that lacquer.
Now, how do you and the company feel about 360 deals? The way that large corporations...
Yeah.
Do you guys work with that kind of stuff?
No.
Or no?
No, we... not yet. I don't think... That's interesting. I don't think... That kind of goes against a lot of kind of what we're into. A lot of those 360 deals include ownership of the art as well, of the music and the publishing. All of our deals are licensing deals. We believe that it's that the artist should have ultimate control over her or his art, period. So we don't own anybody's music that's on AT. Okay? And my impression is that that's often a feature of some of these 360 deals. And 360 deals are where the label takes care of merchandise, touring costs, manufacturing costs. They take basically a chunk of much more of a band's day-to-day income than just what they would take if they just did the record.
Mm-hmm.
That...
to cover the cost they put in, and of course make lots of money.
Right. And the thing is, we have a different business model than major labels. We don't sign dozens of bands a year and throw them all against the wall and hopefully one or two of them will stick. Mm-hmm. We take single bands and we work with them for however many records we choose to, or both us and the band chooses to. And it's a partnership. And all the bands we sign, Jello loves. He's the owner, operator. He makes a final decision about what we sign. So it's a very personal, homegrown, familial kind of thing. So like to say, yeah, we love you, but we're going to take more of your money that you are earning out on the road than we would otherwise, is kind of a weird thing.
Yeah.
In that context,
especially for independent artists.
Yeah, I mean,
perfect sense.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like, we want them to be able to go out on tour, and to go out on tour a lot, because that's how we generally sell records. Mm-hmm. Like, you can have the best band in the world, but if they don't leave town, only 50 people are going to know about them. They're going to love them, but you can't sell 50 records as a record label, even a small record label, and survive.
Now, there was this slump, when music became digital. I remember reading in Tommy Mottola's book how he was the president of Sony,
mm-hmm.
which included Columbia and Epic and all that stuff. And so they were thinking about having a partnership with the the people in charge there in Japan decided not to go along with it, and there's a lot of money possibly lost at that time due to not kind of having that partnership with iTunes and stuff. What did you guys experience when things became digital, when iTunes kind of took over? Was there a slump, or was there never a slump?
Oh, there is a slump. Absolutely. We have found, yes, basically, vinyl had slumped from, in the 90s, I worked at Lookout Records in Berkeley, and we sold probably 10 CDs to every one LP. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty good, because CDs were the new thing then. So they were outselling LPs. And then by the time I got here in the early 2000s, by the mid-2000s, CDs were outselling LPs 25 to 1. However, the amount of CDs and LPs we were selling was declining. At the same time, our old distributor was a bit pokey about getting onto digital platforms. At the time, in the early 2000s, there was a bunch of different platforms. It wasn't as clear which format would be technologically superior or would last, you know, like MP3s versus FLACs versus this versus that. I mean, who the hell knows? I mean, going through the files here, like all of the digital retailers, they were changing their terms like every 6 months as they got bought out, and somebody new said, no, the way you're going to divide up the money is this way. So like there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of flux happening. So our distributor, so a local independently run distributor named Mortem Records, kind of got into digital sales slowly. We eventually, when we moved to our new distributor, Revolver, in 2008, they were fully on the digital train. And so they go directly to major retailers like iTunes, and they go through, I think, the Orchard for...
This distributes my stuff.
Yeah, Orchard does a lot of stuff. So they sub-distribute our digital to the Orchard to do like YouTube and Spotify and a bunch of much smaller accounts. But so now we get all of the digital income that there is to get, basically, for our bands, because we're everywhere. But when digital first came on, we weren't. And part of that was because Jello Biafra he's slow to adapt to new technology at times. And at the time, you have to understand, like, people like from his era of, you know, coming up in the 70s and my era coming up in the 80s, like, we're physical people. Like, we think it physically in terms of music, vinyl, mm-hmm. cassettes, CDs. So like this file that's on our computers that just is able to be deleted with a push of a button or with a crash of a computer hard drive doesn't seem like a real format, but of course it is. Once we and Jello internally accepted it as a format, then we just ran with it. Mm-hmm. And then we were able to really boost up our digital sales because we were doing digital only releases, and we're making sure the digital was added for all of our records, current and future and past, the whole 9 yards. But to your question, yes, there was a slump. It was a pretty big one. It was not helped because we had a huge issue. Because Dead Kennedys, who you may remember from the beginning of the interview, they were the reason that Alternative Tentacles was begun, was to put out their first single. Dead Kennedys, which included Jello as their lead singer, had a big conflict between Jello and 3 of the other primary members. And the other 3 gained legal control of the back catalog, which was a huge part of our income, and took it away from AT and put it on different labels. So we had a huge drop in sales at that point. So that didn't help. So we were buffeted by not only the digital explosion and being less flexible than we should have been, we were also buffeted by losing our primary catalog title. or titles, I should say.
That's a lot of things at the same time.
Yeah.
Now,
but we're still here in 2017, so screw it.
And you're doing very well.
We're still here in 2017.
Yes. Yes. FLAC is, by the way, the lossless digital files, the ones that are the highest quality.
Right.
Now, tell me, in terms of releasing a digital-only project, how much money do you, I mean, not specifically, but do you save a lot of money as a record label?
Yes. I would say, though, we haven't really hit on bands that have a built-in digital crowd yet. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the bands who are doing digital only still have people who are very physical. Mm-hmm. So we're still struggling to kind of push up their sales to where they should be.
Like, do you ever have just digital download cards available at shows for sale or anything like that?
Not for individual bands. We've talked about doing that, and one of our bands, Pins of Light, I love it. They have a download napkin.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It has it's literally a napkin where they screen printed their art on, and then it comes with a little paper napkin holder that has the download code on it.
That's cool.
It's awesome. They sold it. They sell those at their live shows. Mm-hmm. We still have a bunch here, so it didn't really take off. Mm-hmm. But I love that we were able to do that idea.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, because I think a lot of people in live settings don't put a lot of value on digital downloads either. Mm-hmm. I really think I can just get this on my phone, or I'll just get this on my phone right now. Mm-hmm. I don't need the actual card, because it'll be included in my Apple Music subscription or whatever,
Being on all kinds of sides of the business myself, as the listener, I love physical copies. I know that I prefer a lot of music from Russia and Greece, and the stuff they do are one-off prints. The stuff comes out as maybe worth $3 for a CD or $10 for a digipack, and then it goes up to $60 to $100 several years later because it's only released once.
Right.
The resale value, or the value, or the fan value, or the archetypal value that you put into that disc, is something that digital music does not provide. As much as people want to, as much as it sells, it doesn't have either of those values. 22. So how does that, how do you feel as a fan, for example, and as a record label general manager, in terms of the archetypal and fan value of product?
Well, I'm also a DJ, so I DJ on the radio, I DJ in bars and restaurants and stuff. It's really frustrating to me because I've done the same thing. I found this awesome artist, and I went on Discogs.com and found out that they put out one CD and it was it wasn't Greek or Russian, but it was Eastern European, maybe Estonian. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at the prices, the 5 or 3 that were available worldwide for sale were well beyond what I was willing to pay. Mm-hmm. I mean, and I was okay, I could just rip this off, use mp3fi.com or something and rip it from YouTube, but
which we don't suggest.
Right, but that's the only way I can get it without sending $75 to some random Discog seller who may or may not send me a compact disc. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really frustrating. But then again, I'm also like anybody who's into the physical, I'm always going through record stores and looking for that, oh my god, I can't believe I found this moment. So that's, I guess, the upside is I can always find it somewhere, maybe. Mm-hmm. Probably not. but yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it can get very frustrating. Here at AT, for the most part, everything we have is in print, that we have licenses for. I mean, bands leave the label sometimes, and so then that stuff is kept out of print on purpose, obviously, because we're not allowed to make more. But for things that we still have the rights to, which is most of everything, or almost everything, we keep it in press, unless it takes like 20 years to sell through 1,000. That's like
not worth it.
Yeah, I mean, people can find it.
Well, that's wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to share about the record label or upcoming projects?
Well, we have, I mentioned Arno Corps. We have, we're putting out something by a band called Itch.io out of Denver, Colorado. They are insane. They're often only 36 members, but I think they could be up to 50 to 100 members live.
Only?
Yeah, only 36.
Yeah.
And they come out of the tradition of bands like Crash Worship and the Extra Action Marching Band. They do not actually have any, I don't think they have any brass or horns, but they are very percussive, tribal. They basically envelop the crowd. They have all kinds of insane costumes, and I believe they have a Chinese dragon that marches through the crowd, and it's an intense experience. ITCHY-O, Itch.io. And we're putting out their second record in September, and they're actually doing a bunch of dates in the US, which is very exciting, because we found that once people listen to them and they're like, oh, this is pretty cool tribal weirdness, oddball kind of band, but then once they see it, they're like, holy crap, what did I just experience? And
it's immersive.
It's very immersive. I showed you the video for their new single, Gallows Eve. Find it on YouTube.
And I think it would look great in a circus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we were talking. Yeah, putting under a tent and next to a lake in the nighttime would be awesome. Arno Corps is another one that we're doing right now. They're actually right now at the time of this interview touring England and Ireland. Hopefully we'll get them to the East Coast soon. They are the same kind of thing. Like, they have a whole, I wouldn't call it a shtick, I would call it a way of life, of being Austrian superheroes, and they encourage all their heroes and sheroes to step up and be ballsy and unbelievable and fantastic. And those are the names of the 3 records that we're putting out by them, by the way. So
that's a great trilogy.
Yes, it is. Jello Biafra, like, his current band is called Jello Biafra and the Guantanamo School of Medicine. Hopefully they'll have more shows up by the time this comes out. We have a bunch of records by them.
He's touring Southern California right now, right?
He's doing a bunch of DJ dates, actually. He just did Chicago and Detroit, and they're going to be, by the time this comes out, Guantanamo School of Medicine will have played the SoCal Hoedown with Rocket from the Crypt down in Santa Ana. But yeah, and like the label, we're doing a lot of things. We're doing a lot of, we've always been a very progressive, lefty kind of label. So we did Nazi Trump's Fuck Off shirts, which is a takeoff on Dead Kennedy's Nazi Punks Fuck Off. We did that before the election. We sold a bunch, but we're like, ha, this is kind of funny. We didn't think we would have to keep it in print, but it's been actually very, very, it's actually helped the label, put more money into music, because people recognize the message, the political message of resisting the current president and, the right-wingers who he's surrounded himself with. I mean, without getting into my personal feelings about that guy.
Yeah, we'll skip the politics.
But this, it's important though. Mm-hmm. This is a very political label. You have to understand that. Mm-hmm. Jello ran as a Green in 2000 for the presidential nomination. I'm a Green. I'm actually Green elected official. Mm. So politics are actually very important and an integral part of Alternative Tentacles. So I would be really remiss if
What is a Green elected official?
Member of the Green Party.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I'm on the Berkeley Rent Board here in Berkeley, and where I live, and I've been on the board for 9 years. Mm-hmm. I was chair and vice chair of the board, and I mean, as a side note, here in Berkeley, in the East Bay, in the Bay Area, we are having a huge crisis with affordability.
Mm-hmm.
I heard about that. Yeah, so I mean, it's been intense to be in the eye of the storm. Apart from my day job here at Alternative Tentacles.
So anyway, are you trying to lower rents around here?
We're trying to keep them affordable to people.
How do you do that?
It's difficult. There's a bunch of laws that basically lay out a fair framework that landlords and tenants follow. So landlords and tenants, both sides have rights and responsibilities, and when either side steps out of those boundaries, then we're available to do mediation, to make determinations. We work with the Berkeley City Council to craft legislation that the City Council passes that's outside of our jurisdiction, but we're basically the people in town who have the expertise on landlord-tenant relations, law. We have records going back to 1980 about what has been happening in literally thousands and thousands of units, like what the rent was, what the amenities have been. So, I mean,
do you think there's a way that some kind of housing can be made in Berkeley that maybe for artists or whatever that is very reasonably priced?
There's ways. I mean, there's a lot of nonprofit developers who are looking at that kind of thing. We fought for, we being individuals who are involved with the rent board, I think actually the rent board endorsed this as well, a slight increase in the sales tax, the business license fee for larger landlords that they pay, that money is earmarked for affordability and for homeless services. So we have something called the Affordable Housing Tax Fund, which is, the Affordable Housing. Well, basically, it's a fund for affordable housing for nonprofits to use, and then so basically, the city of Berkeley can basically grant money to nonprofit developers as seed money. Then the nonprofit developers can go out and purchase land and develop, whether it's for seniors, whether it's for artists, whether it's for people below area median income, whatever.
Yeah, my personal thing about it is one day if I ever have the money to do so, I'd love to create a homeless foundation kind of thing. That's my number one charity thing. Yeah, I feel extremely strong about it.
That's fantastic. That's great to hear. I mean, it's really, it's
I don't think anybody should ever be homeless.
Yeah.
I just think it's a horrible thing. I can't speak for everybody. Maybe somebody likes it. I don't know, but I don't think in general it's a pretty awful thing.
Absolutely.
So altogether, it's a pleasure speaking with you. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? Anything coming up, or anything you'd like to share about the record label?
You can go to alternativetentacles.com. We're doing all kinds of stuff, digitally, social media. Your Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. All that stuff. Because we're a label in 2017, and so we're easy to find. And check us out. And honestly, like I said, we're musical. We're political. We're very much responsive. And we depend on our fans and supporters to keep us in business, because we all know that we can all go somewhere online and find every single piece of music that we're talking about for free,
and we don't want to do that.
And so we work very, very hard to make sure that we earn the loyalty of our fans and supporters, because it's that's something you can't purchase that.
Right. And also, just a message about that is, in order to keep artists going and in order to keep labels going, please respect the art. And, I don't think that paying $10 or $15 is a lot for somebody's year and a half worth of work.
It's not.
So it's okay, I mean, I know that, it's not for me to say it's okay on other people's behalfs, but I just think that, I think it's good I think it's good to respect that creativity and keep the label going another 100 million years.
Yeah, right. It seems like 100 million years, but great years. Like I said, there's all kinds of cool stuff in our back catalog that, when I first started working here, I started going through the stacks and pulling out things I'd never heard of before, and it's super cool, And I think most labels that have been around for a while are like that. There's lots of surprises in the stacks that, So yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you.